This is a recap to cover some of the issues we had in week 3. Part of the way to understand what happened in week 3 for some of you is to look at back to tints, shades, and tones from week 1. As we know then, any of those color modifications caused a reduction in saturation. Now what happened this week that I noticed is, let this refresh for a minute. There we go. Is that, you're looking at the S value here in HSB as a reduction in saturation, this 50%, you would see that as a reduction in saturation. But when we looked at it with a shade, you would see this S value of 100% and think of that as fully saturated. Now, when you look at Adobe's site for HSB, they define the S as saturation, the B as brightness. You'll notice I don't ever refer to it that way. I refer to it simply as S and B. And there's a reason why we've been doing that. We've kind of mentioned briefly about it on week 1, but let's take another look at it to kind of really clear this up. So to kind of recap where we're at with this image, we have fully saturated hues on this side. We have a tint here, which we know is a color modification. By adding white, reduces saturation. We have a shade here, which is a reduction in the B value of brightness in HSB, but we also know that's a reduction in saturation. And then we have this more of a tone. Now, while this tone doesn't maintain a constant value, we can see that it's a tone by the addition of both white and black in the reduced S and B values. Now, on this tone, I did one just to keep our value constant. You can see that here. And to kind of show the differences of how you may be perceiving this as being lighter, but it's important to recognize that they're the same value. Even though this is a reduction in saturation, there's no value difference here. It's just a clear reduction in saturation. While this one gets darker in value, but also represents a tone, since it includes both a decrease or an addition of white and black through a decreased value of S and B. So, in context of, S and B in relation to the hue saturation tool, I'm selecting this area here, and if we pull up my hue saturation tool, we can see that lightness is basically referring to a reduction in S by going to a positive number, a reduction in B value, leading to a black or what we considered a shade in week 1. Now this is where the real conflict comes in. We have our HSB over here, and we see that S is defined as saturation, but when we talk about saturation in the hue saturation tool, it reflects more on our understanding of what a tone is. As you can see, it goes to gray. So returning that back, now just to go back here one more time, we have a lightness slider. We'll go ahead and up this, and we can see this here in HSB that is a reduction of only the S value. At this point it's 25%. So it's important to understand this distinction between how HSB uses the S value as relating to saturation, but also the hue saturation tool addresses saturation as a gray, and here we're having it in HSB as a white. So this is an important distinction to make, that as both of these percentages decrease, they're indicating an addition of white and black respectively, S being our white, B being our black, and both of those relate to saturation. It is important to identify this, that when we're talking, especially as we move into color depth, a reduction in saturation occurs with both of these numbers decreasing, not just the S value. So if you have questions about this, let me know. This is really a piece that we really need to clear up before we move on much further. It was one of the more serious issues that was experienced in week 3. So let me know where we're at. Thanks.